Hollywood icon who has starred in some of the biggest blockbuster films for 5 decades.
Yeah, Faye Dunaway grabbed our attention in Bonnie and Clyde and went on to such classics as Chinatown.
Well, that it's a faith story. I became aware of this genre, you know, maybe a year or two ago, and I told my agent to look out for projects that I could do because, you know, and so it's kind of bittersweet. You win and you win, and yet there are losses also.
She was Hollywood's most feared actress, the star they called the Dreaded Dunaway. Now, at 84, Faye Dunaway breaks her silence about what really happened on those explosive movie sets. The hair-ripping incident that made her snap, the bipolar disorder she hid for years, and the dark truth about why she really threw that cup of urine in Roman Polanski's face. Hollywood's most dangerous diva is finally ready to tell all. Faye Dunaway was born Dorothy Faye Dunaway on January 14, 1941, in Bascom, Florida. Her father was a career officer in the U.S. Army. Her mother was a homemaker. They had married young in 1939, but separated by the time Faye was 14. Her family background was a mix of Ulster Scottish, Irish, and German ancestry. Because of her father's military career, she moved constantly. Texas, Utah, and even Mannheim, Germany became temporary homes. Some children might have struggled with that kind of life, but Faye saw it differently. Every new place brought new faces, new voices, and new ways of being. She absorbed it all. She didn't just watch the world around her. She threw herself into creative expression. She took lessons in ballet, tap dancing, piano, and singing. Even with all the moving, she stayed focused on her education. In 1958, she graduated from Leon High School in Tallahassee, Florida. At first, she thought about becoming a teacher. She enrolled at the University of Florida with that plan in mind. But something kept pulling her toward the stage. Realizing where her true passion lay, she transferred to Boston University's School of Fine and Applied Arts. By 1962, she had earned a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. Her time there shaped her in ways she hadn't expected. She spent her summers performing at Harvard's Loeb Drama Center, working with people who took acting as seriously as she did. In one production of The Crucible, Arthur Miller himself sat in the audience. He left impressed. New York was the next step. She trained at the American National Theater and Academy, pushing herself harder than ever. Then came a life-changing decision. She had the chance to study at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts through a Fulbright scholarship. At the same time, she was offered a role in Anta's production of A Man for All Seasons. She could either continue studying or dive straight into the professional world. She chose the stage. That decision launched her career. Her Broadway debut came with A Man for All Seasons, where she played Margaret Moore. But her real breakthrough was Hogan's Goat. The play ran for 607 performances, making her a star in New York theater. More importantly, it introduced her to playwright William Alfred. He became her mentor and shaped the way she thought about acting. In her autobiography, Looking for Gatsby, she described him as one of the most important figures in her life. Hollywood took notice. Her first film, The Happening, 1967, wasn't a major hit, but it gave her a start. That same year, she appeared in Otto Preminger's Hurry Sundown. The film had its flaws, but her performance stood out. Faye Dunaway's rise to fame started with Bonnie and Clyde. Playing Bonnie Parker changed everything for her. The film, released in 1967, was bold, violent, and completely different from anything Hollywood had made before. It was directed by Arthur Penn and told the story of two outlaws who became legends. Critics were divided at first. Some thought it was too brutal. Others saw it as a masterpiece. Audiences, however, loved it. The film became a cultural phenomenon and shaped the future of cinema. Dunaway brought something special to Bonnie Parker. She wasn't just playing a criminal. She made Bonnie ambitious, restless, and vulnerable all at once. Her chemistry with Warren Beatty, who played Clyde Barrow, was unforgettable.
Well, I'm Miss Bonnie Parker, and this here's Mr. Clyde Barrow. We rob banks.
They made audiences root for two criminals, even as their crimes became more reckless. But Dunaway wasn't the first choice for the role. Jane Fonda and Natalie Wood were considered before Penn insisted on casting her. To prepare, she lost 30 pounds and completely transformed her look. The film earned 9 Academy Award nominations and won 2. Its final scene, a brutal ambush where Bonnie and Clyde are gunned down, became one of the most famous endings in film history. Bonnie and Clyde was later preserved in the National Film Registry. It was more than just a hit. It was a turning point in Hollywood. For Dunaway, the role of Bonnie Parker made her a star. In The Thomas Crown Affair, Dunaway played Vicki Anderson, a smart and independent investigator. This time, she wasn't an outlaw. She was the one chasing one. The film, released in 1968 and directed by Norman Jewison, paired her with Steve McQueen. Their chemistry was intense. One scene, a slow and silent game of chess, became one of the most famous moments in film history. No words were spoken, yet the tension between them was impossible to miss. McQueen had doubts about working with Dunaway. Warren Beatty had felt the same way before Bonnie and Clyde. Both actors changed their minds after seeing her in action. She made Vicki Anderson more than just a love interest. Her character was as sharp as the man she was chasing. The film was known for its style. Dunaway had over 29 costume changes, each more stunning than the last. Jewison used innovative split-screen techniques to make the heists more exciting. Even the cars became iconic, including Vicki's Ferrari 275 GTB 4NART Spider, one of only 10 ever made. The Thomas Crown Affair earned 2 Academy Award nominations and 1 for Best Original Song. It showed that Dunaway could play any kind of role and still steal the screen. Her next major film, Little Big Man, took her in a different direction. Released in 1970 and directed by Arthur Penn, the film starred Dustin Hoffman as Jack Crabb, a man caught between two worlds. Dunaway played Mrs. Pendrake, a minister's wife who seemed proper and religious, but hid a more complicated side. Her screen time was short, but she made a lasting impact. Little Big Man was a revisionist Western, blending satire with serious themes. It showed Native Americans in a more sympathetic light, something rare for Hollywood at the time. The film was both a critical and commercial success. It earned 3 BAFTA nominations and was later added to the National Film Registry. Dunaway's role was small but memorable. She had a way of making even brief appearances unforgettable. Then came Chinatown. If Bonnie and Clyde made her famous, Chinatown made her a legend. Released in 1974 and directed by Roman Polanski, the film was a neo-noir masterpiece. It followed a private investigator, played by Jack Nicholson, as he uncovered corruption in 1930s Los Angeles. Dunaway played Evelyn Mulray, a woman with secrets that changed everything. At first, she seemed like a classic femme fatale. As the film went on, her story became more tragic. She was hiding something terrible, and when the truth came out, it shocked audiences. Dunaway's performance was haunting. She made Evelyn mysterious, but also deeply human. Filming was not easy. Polanski was a perfectionist and pushed Dunaway to her limits. They clashed often, but the result was one of the greatest performances of her career. Chinatown received 11 Academy Award nominations and won Best Original Screenplay. Dunaway earned her second nomination for Best Actress. Decades later, Evelyn Mulwray remains one of the most studied characters in film history. 2 years later, Dunaway gave her most powerful performance in Network. This time, she played Diana Christensen, a ruthless television executive. She didn't care about ethics or morality. She cared about ratings. Network, released in 1976 and directed by Sidney Lumet, was a sharp critique of media sensationalism. It showed a world where television news turned into entertainment, and people would do anything for an audience. Diana Christensen was at the center of it all. She was ambitious and willing to cross any line to stay ahead. Unlike Evelyn Mulwray, who was shaped by tragedy, Diana had no illusions. She was cold, calculating, and completely in control. Dunaway's performance was mesmerizing. She made Diana both fascinating and terrifying. The film was a massive success, earning 10 Academy Award nominations. It won 4, including Best Actress for Dunaway.
And may I just add a special thank you to the friends in the back room, Susan Germain and Lee Harmon. Thank you.
In the late 1960s and 70s, Faye gave one powerhouse performance after another. Bonnie and Clyde made her famous. Chinatown proved she was one of the best actresses of her generation. Network won her an Oscar, but after reaching the top, her career took a turn no one saw coming. It all started with Mommy Dearest in 1981. The film was supposed to be a serious drama, based on Christina Crawford's memoir about her adoptive mother, Joan Crawford. The book painted Crawford as an abusive perfectionist who ruled her home with fear. Dunaway threw herself into the role, transforming completely. She looked and sounded just like Joan Crawford. Early on, critics praised her for the performance, calling it bold and fearless. But something went wrong. The film was intense, but Dunaway's performance pushed it even further. Every emotion was turned up to the highest level. Then came the moment that changed everything: the wire hanger scene. In one of the most famous moments in movie history, Dunaway's Joan Crawford storms into her daughter's room and screams in rage over the sight of wire hangers in the closet. It was meant to be terrifying, but audiences didn't react the way the filmmakers expected. They laughed. That single scene turned the movie from a dark drama into something else entirely. Instead of shocking people, it became campy and over the top. Paramount Pictures realized what had happened and quickly rebranded the film. It was no longer just a drama. It was a cult film in the making. The movie made money, earning $25 million on a $10 million budget. But critics destroyed it. It won 5 Golden Raspberry Awards, including Worst Actress for Dunaway. For Dunaway, it was devastating. The film was supposed to be a triumph, but instead, it became something people mocked. She later said the role left a deep wound on her. She blamed the director, Frank Perry, saying he didn't guide her properly and let the film get out of control. Hollywood was quick to turn against her. She wasn't just the Oscar-winning actress from Network anymore. She was the face of Mommy Dearest. But that wasn't the only reason her career was struggling. By the early 80s, Hollywood had a habit of pushing actresses aside once they hit 40. Studios wanted fresh faces, and Dunaway's old-school glamour was no longer in demand. Younger stars like Sally Field and Deborah Winger were getting the roles she once would have played. On top of that, Dunaway was gaining a reputation for being difficult on set. Stories spread about her temper and high expectations. Directors and producers became hesitant to work with her. Dunaway later admitted that she made mistakes during this time. In her memoir, Looking for Gatsby, she wrote about turning down roles that could have helped her career. Some decisions were based on fear. Others were simply bad judgment. One by one, the big roles stopped coming. By the mid-80s, she was appearing in smaller films with less impact. Then came Sunset Boulevard. In 1994, Dunaway was set to take over the role of Norma Desmond in the Los Angeles production of Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical. It was a major comeback opportunity. Norma Desmond was a former movie star desperate to reclaim her fame, a character Dunaway could relate to. But just weeks before she was supposed to take the stage, Lloyd Webber fired her. He claimed she wasn't strong enough vocally to handle the role. The fallout was brutal. Not only was Dunaway fired, but the entire Los Angeles production shut down. She was furious. She sued Lloyd Webber for $6 million, accusing him of using her as a scapegoat for the show's financial problems. She claimed he had praised her singing during auditions, only to suddenly change his mind. The lawsuit was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but the damage was done. The Sunset Boulevard controversy only added to the perception that Dunaway was difficult to work with. It also raised questions about why she had been cast in a musical in the first place. She had never been known as a singer, and some wondered if the role had been doomed from the start. Meanwhile, Faye Dunaway's personal life was as dramatic as the roles she played on screen. At the height of her career, she married Peter Wolf, the lead singer of the J. Geils Band. Their romance moved fast. They dated for 2 years, got engaged, then tied the knot in a private Beverly Hills ceremony the very next day. Dunaway was already a Hollywood icon with Bonnie and Clyde and Chinatown.
I mean, for me and for them to actually see the face and, see the shit happening in front of them is quite something unusual.
Wolf was caught up in the relentless demands of touring and recording. They admired each other deeply. She once described their bond as two warriors standing shoulder to shoulder, both ambitious, both driven, both determined to succeed. But success can pull people apart as much as it brings them together. While Dunaway kept rising in Hollywood, winning an Oscar for Network, Wolf was always on the road. The distance took a toll. By 1978, their marriage was over. Their divorce was finalized the next year. Even after the split, they spoke of each other with respect. Wolf later insisted that Love Stinks, one of his band's biggest hits, wasn't about their breakup, though many fans still wonder if it was. In 1983, Dunaway married British photographer Terry O'Neill. They had met years earlier during a People magazine photo shoot. That was when he took one of the most famous pictures of her, sitting by a hotel pool, staring at her newly won Oscar, lost in thought. Their relationship started with excitement and promise. She moved to England to escape Hollywood's chaos. They wanted a quieter life. But even away from Los Angeles, work still got in the way. O'Neill later admitted he struggled to balance his career with family life. Their marriage lasted 5 years before ending in divorce. During their time together, they adopted a son, Liam. For years, Dunaway insisted that Liam was her biological child. She never addressed the rumors that he had been adopted. Then, in 2003, O'Neill confirmed what many had suspected. Liam was adopted. The revelation caused a media stir. Dunaway explained that she had kept it private because of the pressures and expectations of Hollywood. She described motherhood as one of her greatest joys, a role more important to her than any film she had ever done. Liam has always spoken warmly about his mother, appearing by her side at public events. Dunaway's life wasn't without struggles. For years, she was known for being difficult on set. Stories about her outbursts and mood swings followed her throughout her career. Later, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The news brought clarity. She had spent decades battling emotions she couldn't fully understand. Highs that felt unstoppable. Lows that left her drained. She admitted that her condition made relationships hard, both personal and professional. but it also fueled her performances. She tapped into those deep emotions for roles like Diana Christensen in Network.
But, you know, we had a good time, actually. It was nice to see him again and nice to do this together. So it was good.
In recent years, she has spoken openly about her mental health, hoping to bring awareness to others facing the same struggles. Alcohol became another challenge. Her father had battled alcoholism, and she found herself falling into the same patterns. At first, drinking was a way to unwind. Over time, it became a problem. Gin martinis were her weakness. She relied on them in moments of stress and loneliness. Eventually, she realized she needed help. She joined Alcoholics Anonymous and began the journey to sobriety. Now, she credits her recovery with giving her a second chance, helping her rebuild relationships, especially with her son. Faye Dunaway never followed a straight path in Hollywood. She stepped away from acting more than once, sometimes to focus on her personal life, sometimes to reassess her career. After the towering inferno in 1974, she took a break to concentrate on her marriage to musician Peter Wolf. But every time she left, she found a way back. Each return felt less like a comeback and more like another chapter in a career that refused to fade. One of her most striking performances came in Barfly, 1987. This was a different side of Dunaway. Nothing like the glamorous roles she had played before. She took on the role of Wanda Wilcox, a woman lost in the cycle of alcoholism, living day to day in dive bars, clinging to whatever scraps of love she could find. Mickey Rourke played Henry Chinaski, a thinly veiled version of writer Charles Bukowski, whose work inspired the film. Together, Dunaway and Rourke created something raw and unsettling. Their characters were self-destructive, yet deeply connected, trapped in a world of cheap liquor and bad decisions. Dunaway completely transformed herself for the role. She left behind any trace of Hollywood elegance, making Wanda feel real in a way that few actors could. Critics took notice. Pauline Kael praised her for keeping the performance honest, never slipping into over-the-top drama. Roger Ebert saw it as a major moment in her career, a chance for her to prove that she could take risks and push her own limits. The film didn't make much money, but it gained a cult following. It even competed for the Palme d'Or at Cannes. For Dunaway, Barfly wasn't just another role. It was a reminder of why she loved acting in the first place. She later called it one of her favorites. In 1990, she took on a completely different role in The Handmaid's Tale, a film adaptation of Margaret Atwood's dystopian novel. She played Serena Joy, the wife of Robert Duvall's commander Fred Waterford. In this world, women had been stripped of their rights, forced into rigid roles under a totalitarian government. Serena Joy had power, but she was still trapped in a system that controlled her. Dunaway made the character cold and calculating, but she also hinted at something deeper. Beneath her strict exterior, there was bitterness and frustration. A woman who had once believed in the ideals of this new society, but now felt caged by them. Her scenes with Natasha Richardson's Offred carried quiet tension. Every glance, every word seemed to have something hidden beneath it. The film itself struggled. It only made $5 million at the box office, far less than its $13 million budget. Many critics felt it didn't fully capture the depth of Atwood's novel. Some blamed the director's decision to frame it as more of a thriller rather than focusing on its social themes. But even in a flawed adaptation, Dunaway's performance stood out. She gave Serena Joy layers that made her more than just a villain. By 1993, she was making her mark on television. That year, she guest starred in a special episode of Columbo titled It's All in the Game. This wasn't a typical Columbo mystery. Peter Falk, who played the legendary detective, had written the script himself. He wanted to explore something new. What would happen if Columbo found himself emotionally drawn to a suspect? Dunaway played Lauren Staton, a wealthy socialite accused of murder. From the moment she appeared on screen, she brought something different to the series. Lauren wasn't just another criminal for Columbo to outsmart. She was charming, sophisticated, and maybe even dangerous. Their scenes together crackled with chemistry. For the first time, the detective seemed slightly off balance, caught in a game that wasn't just about solving a case. The performance won her an Emmy for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Drama Series. Critics praised the episode for taking risks and showing a different side of Columbo. Years later, it remains one of the most memorable stories in the show's history. Then came Gia, 1998, an HBO film about the rise and fall of supermodel Gia Karangi. Angelina Jolie played the lead role, but Dunaway played Wilhelmina Cooper, the modeling agent who discovered Gia and tried to guide her through the cutthroat fashion industry. Wilhelmina wasn't the most dramatic character in the film, but Dunaway made her presence felt. She played her as a mentor, a steady hand in Gia's chaotic life. When everything else was spinning out of control, Wilhelmina was one of the few people who genuinely cared. Critics praised Dunaway for grounding the film with quiet authority. Her performance earned her a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress. Faye talent made her a Hollywood icon, but her fiery personality made her just as famous off-screen. One of the most explosive clashes in film history happened between her and director Roman Polanski on the set of Chinatown in 1974. Their working relationship was a disaster from the start. Polanski was demanding and controlling. Dunaway refused to be pushed around. One of their worst fights started over something small. During a close-up, a single strand of Dunaway's hair kept falling into her face. Instead of stopping the scene to fix it, Polanski walked over and ripped it straight out of her scalp. Dunaway was furious. She stormed off the set. Polanski later called her reaction insane. She called him cruel. Things only got worse. One scene required Dunaway to sit in a hot car for hours while they reshot the same take over and over. At one point, she asked for a bathroom break. Polanski refused. Dunaway wasn't going to let him win. She urinated into a cup, then threw it in his face, yelling, "You cunt! That's piss!" The crew stood in stunned silence. It was one of the most shocking moments in Hollywood history. Jack Nicholson, Dunaway's co-star, saw it all. He respected her talent, but had his own struggles with her on set. After working with her, he gave her a nickname, the Dreaded Dunaway. It was part joke, part warning. One of their most intense scenes involved Nicholson slapping Dunaway's character multiple times. At first, they faked the slaps. Dunaway insisted they be real. Nicholson hesitated, but finally agreed. He struck her over and over until the take was perfect. The scene became one of the most powerful in the film. Chinatown was a masterpiece, but the damage was done. Dunaway and Polanski never worked together again. Her reputation for being difficult followed her for decades. In 2019, she tried to make a Broadway comeback with Tea at 5, a one-woman show about Katharine Hepburn. It was supposed to be her grand return to the stage, but it ended in disaster. Crew members accused her of screaming at them, slapping people, and even throwing objects like mirrors and hairpins. She made strange demands, including banning anyone from wearing white because she found it distracting. On July 10th, just before curtain, the show was canceled without warning. Days later, Dunaway was fired. The production moved forward with a different actress. It wasn't the first time this had happened to her. She was removed from Andrew Lloyd Webber's Sunset Boulevard in 1994 under similar circumstances. Meanwhile, after 8 years away from feature films, Faye Dunaway returned to the big screen in 2017. She took on roles in Inconceivable, The Case for Christ, and The Bye-Bye Man, proving that she could still captivate audiences in any genre. Each film brought something different, showing her ability to adapt and reminding Hollywood that she was far from done. In Inconceivable, she played Donna, a character caught in the middle of a tense psychological thriller. The film starred Nicolas Cage and Gina Gershon, blending veteran actors with newer faces. It received mixed reviews, but Dunaway's presence gave it weight. Even in a supporting role, she knew how to make an impact. Released on June 30th, 2017, and directed by Jonathan Baker, the film stood out as one of her rare projects in the thriller genre. She took a different path with The Case for Christ, a drama based on the true story of journalist Lee Strobel. Dunaway played Dr. Roberta Waters, a psychologist who helps the main character as he questions his beliefs. The film was well received, praised for its emotional depth and thought-provoking themes. Dunaway's role was brief, but she brought wisdom and strength to every scene. Then came The Bye-Bye Man, a horror film where she played Widow Redman, a mysterious and unsettling character. Horror wasn't a genre she often explored, but she gave the role her usual intensity. The film itself faced criticism, but her performance stood out. It was another reminder that she could take on any role and make it her own. Years later, in 2024, her story became the focus of an HBO documentary titled Faye, directed by Laurent Bouzereau. Premiering at the Cannes Film Festival under the Cannes Classics section, it received high praise for its honest look at her life and career. It wasn't just a celebration of her work, it was an intimate look at the struggles she faced behind the scenes. The documentary featured candid interviews, archival footage, and insights from actors like Sharon Stone and Mickey Rourke. It explored her battles with mental health, including a late-in-life diagnosis of bipolar disorder. It also addressed the challenges she faced as a woman in Hollywood, where strong, outspoken actresses were often labeled difficult. Instead of avoiding the controversies,
I did have a lot of choices, but you're right, it is the choices. You have to choose. Network.
Faye put them in context, showing how the industry had judged her differently from her male peers. As the documentary's release approached, Dunaway spoke openly about her past. In interviews, she discussed her struggles with alcoholism, the pressure of fame, and the constant fight to stay relevant in an industry that moves on quickly. For years, the public had seen her as an intense, sometimes unpredictable figure. Now, she was telling her own story,